What if everything you thought you knew about sex, desire, and self-worth wasn't quite the whole story? This is The Reveal, a podcast about what happens when we ask better questions about the most intimate parts of being human. I'm Elle, certified sexologist and life coach. And every week I invite therapists, sexual health experts, wellness leaders, and cultural thinkers to help us explore the layered and often overlooked space where sexuality, identity, and emotional truth meet. These are conversations about how we heal, how we connect, and how we find real joy and relief in a world that doesn't always make either easy. Curious? So am I. This is The Reveal. Oh, and just a heads up, sometimes when I forget a word mid-sentence, I jokingly substitute it with the word vagina, even if it doesn't make sense. It's a habit, but honestly, it makes me laugh, and hopefully you too. Welcome to The Reveal. I'm your host, Elle, and today we're pulling back the curtain on one of the most powerful and damaging forces shaping our sexuality: shame. Sexual shame isn't just about feeling embarrassed in the bedroom. It's a cultural architecture. It's been handed down through religion, medicine, media, and family systems as a way to regulate bodies, desires, and identities. And even when we think we've left those systems behind, shame has a way of living on inside us, quietly shaping how we experience pleasure, intimacy, and even our own worth. To unpack this, I'm joined by sex educator Erica Smith, who shows us shame isn't a personal failing. It's a social inheritance we can question, challenge, and ultimately move beyond. In this episode, we'll talk about where sexual shame comes from, how it lodges itself in our bodies and relationships, and what it really takes to create a life where pleasure is not just possible, but central. This isn't just about sex. It's about freedom, resilience, and the radical act of joy. Let's get into it. Erica Smith is an award-winning sexuality educator and consultant with 25 years of experience. Throughout her career, she has provided comprehensive sex education and advocacy to young women and LGBTQ+ youth in Philadelphia's juvenile justice system, worked in abortion care, and supported HIV+ and transgender adolescents and their families. In 2019, she developed a purity culture dropout program to help people learn of all the sex education that they missed growing up in purity culture. Sex ed that is accurate, queer inclusive, trauma-informed, compassionate, and comprehensive. She has since worked with hundreds of people to help them learn about healthy sexuality after high control religion. Welcome, Erica.
Thank you so much, Elle. I'm really excited to be chatting with you today.
I'm excited to have you. You are the doyenne of purity culture and shame.
That's a great title.
You are. That's just what I'll call you from now on.
Love that. Thank you.
Before we dive in, I wanted to ask you how you define sexual shame and how it's different from guilt or embarrassment.
Yeah. When I'm talking to my clients about shame, I definitely make that distinction that guilt is when you feel regret for an action you took. Like perhaps maybe I was shitty to my partner and I feel bad that I did that thing. So it's feeling bad about something you did. But shame is this deeply rooted feeling that you are just bad, that it's not your actions, that it's you at the core. And that is much more sinister than guilt.
Yeah, sinister is a good word because it really is sort of a villain.
Very much so.
Where do most people learn their sexual shame? Is it primarily from family, religion, schools, culture?
It is multi-layered. It comes from all directions, but people can experience it. Really, I think the most harmful kind is or at least the most impactful, when it comes directly from your parents and caregivers. So oftentimes it's young children and maybe older children behaving in what you and I would consider completely appropriate developmentally with their sexuality. So maybe they are curious about their bodies, or they are curious about the bodies of their friends, or maybe they're reading a book about sex. And the way the parent reacts to that, to what's usually developmentally typical, can instill shame. So if the parent doesn't know how to respond and immediately has like a reaction that is like, oh no, this is bad.
Right.
That instills shame. And then there's another layer for the folks I tend to work with where the piece comes in where it becomes religious sexual shame. So it wouldn't just be saying we don't touch ourselves in this house. It would be when you touch yourself, God doesn't like that. So that just adds this like omnipotent watching, all consuming sort of, yeah.
Yeah. Wow. It's interesting because I grew up my father is a scientist and my mother was an actress. And neither of them talked to me about sex at all. And I went to a K through 12 school, and we ended up having this great girl who was like, I don't know how old she was, maybe 16. Amy Finkel taught us about the birds and the bees.
Oh,
And, that's the only sex education I ever got. And so taking it from parents who are pretty logical, and also kind of free spirited, not talking about it was enough to instill shame in
yes.
me.
Yeah. Just the silence can instill shame.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So why does it linger? Why does it linger even when ideology is gone or even when we've grown up?
Yeah, I think there's something that the folks that I work with experience so often, which is they have intellectually decided that they do not believe that it's bad to have sex. They do not believe that sexuality is harmful, sinful, or evil. And they've done all this work and they're like, but I don't believe this stuff anymore. Why is it still in me? Like, why is it still fucking with me, essentially? And I mean, it becomes so deeply rooted that it often is like your nervous system begins responding. It's not about what is in your brain. It's about like this instant sort of
instinct,
like instinct, like a nervous system response. One of the things about purity culture shame and sexual shame that's religious is there is evidence that the people that were raised with really bad fear, misinformation, and shame around sex experience some of the same things that survivors of childhood sexual abuse experience.
Oh, wow.
And that is like the fear of sex, the avoidance, some people getting like a freeze or a flight response to it, just like an inability to, like your whole body, is reacting as if you were in danger. And sometimes people will say, I just kind of thought maybe I had experienced abuse and didn't remember, but that's not what it is. It's the shame that's causing them to have this reaction, this like full body, just discomfort with it.
That's so powerful because when it's in your body, that can turn up as vaginismus, which is, your pelvic floor muscles, for people that don't know, your pelvic floor muscles seize and won't let anything in. And it's very painful and distressing when it happens. And it could just make you recoil when someone touches you or in the most innocent way. And in that way, like, how does it show up in people's lives, not just in the bedroom, but in their sense of identity and confidence or just relationships?
As you and I know, sexuality is such a holistic part of who we are. It's part of every aspect of our lives. So when there's so much shame around sexuality, some examples I can think of would be major discomfort with your own body. So body image stuff, whether it's I don't look right or my vagina smells bad or my genitals are ugly, a sense of shame about just the general functioning of your body means negative body image, which can affect your enjoyment of sex. Another thing is that people get really, avoidant of the topic in general. So sometimes they're afraid to even pursue or enter into a romantic or sexual relationship because it is more comfortable to sort of compartmentalize that altogether.
Yeah, wow.
And another thing I talk to people a lot about is this sense for parents that they are like so afraid of instilling the same sort of sexual shame in their children, but they're not sure how to make that not
Right.
happen.
Yeah,
So
I
they're
can
like,
imagine that's huge.
yeah.
Yeah.
So they're like, I have a child, I have several children, and I don't want them to get this same messaging I did and to have these experiences I'm having. But how do I do that while I'm still like working through my own shame?
Right. Gosh, I do get calls like that for clients who are parents who are just like, I want to be able to pass this on to my kids. And I don't know how to do it because I never got it. And I don't want my own stuff coming into it. And that's where people will call you, you know?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And the good news is like you can totally do it. I see parents doing it all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Um, so how else do you see with your clients and within your consulting work and all of that? How does sexual shame actually manifest in the body? We talked about vaginismus, but are there patterns that you see in how people carry it physically or somatically?
Yeah, I ask that question very often. I like to ask people, when you feel shame, like what does it feel like physically? Can you pinpoint it? And I tend to get a variety of answers, but most often it's just like a freeze response or a deep sense of discomfort in the belly and the gut, often a feeling of like tightness in the chest. Those are the things that I hear the most often, other than the vaginismus, the tight pelvic floor, the difficulty with penetration.
Painful sex, I would
Hmm.
imagine would be another one.
Yeah, and you said this earlier, but recoiling from touch—that's another one. There are a lot of women I talk to that were told, sex isn't even supposed to be pleasurable for you. You're just doing a duty for your husband, essentially. So then they're afraid that any affectionate touch their husband wants to offer them is going to turn into an expectation for sex. So they're like, I don't even want to cuddle because what if he thinks that means I want to have sex?
That's so prevalent. It's so prevalent
Yeah.
even in people who don't have a shame problem or a shame issue. It's just the way that we've been set up by society. Men have been set up and in heterosexual relationships, how women have been set up to, sort of be coy and
Yeah.
all
And
these things.
I think it also speaks a little to the assumption that sex has to be a series of steps that occurs with the finale of penis and vagina. So if you're thinking even a little bit of spooning, he's going to want to have vaginal penetration. Like if that's what you were told, then it's really hard to just be like, let's relax into this and see where it goes. And I will have boundaries and I will have my pleasure. Like
Right.
that's, yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking about how it might affect communication between partners because maybe when you're first getting used to a new partner, how do you bring up the idea of, or not the idea, but how you bring up the issue of your own shame and how it might. I've often talked about this guy that I was with once who asked me if there was any place in my body I didn't want to be touched. And I just loved that because
Oh, that's a
it
beautiful
thinks,
question.
isn't that a beautiful question? And it sort of puts someone who has some shame away, puts it down, it tamps it down, and you feel comfortable because someone else has thought of it.
Yes.
But what are some other ways that we can help ourselves when we're in that position where we just feel so ashamed of doing anything with our partner?
Well, I mean, the antidote to shame is speaking it out loud. And I know that not everybody is really comfortable doing that. That's the hallmark of shame, right? We keep it inside and it keeps growing. But I do like to give people sometimes straight up talking points, like ways that they can communicate with partners about it. I like to share with people, like, before you have a sexual experience, if there's any like important need to know info that you're exchanging, like, hey, are we going to use this kind of protection, or are we going to do it here, or this is as far as I'm comfortable going, that's the time that it would be helpful to share anything else that you think can create a safer experience for you.
Mm-hmm.
I liken it to like you're building like scaffolding that is making it more likely that your experience will be positive. And one of those things is sharing. Sometimes I get a little freaked out, or I have a history of I learned a lot of really bad information about sex when I was younger, and I grew up super religious. And I just want you to know that in case I maybe seem like I'm tuning out, or in case I freeze up, I want you to know why that might be. And, some people are really comfortable. They want people to know that information up front. And then I've worked with other people who are like, no, I'm just going to wing it, and I would rather not tell them. And that's truly an individual decision.
Yeah. Yeah. I would think too that it would be, the role of shame in blocking pleasure and desire or orgasm, taking you out of the moment. Because I know when I work with body image clients, it's all about staying in the moment, and like even in the second, because it is so distracting to be thinking about what someone else is thinking about, something that you're not sure about your body. What are your thoughts on that?
Can you rephrase the question?
Yeah.
I just need a little rephrase.
No, that's okay. What role does shame play in blocking pleasure, desire, or orgasm?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
People are in their heads the whole time in so many instances. And I will add that the folks that I'm working with who grew up in mostly evangelical Christianity, or what I would call a very fundamentalist version of Christianity, they were taught to dissociate from their bodies as a matter of their faith, that God doesn't, what goes on in your earthly body isn't of importance. You just need to be thinking about your faith. And I work with a lot of people who have said this exact thing. I learned from my pastor that anything that felt good was probably actually bad.
Wow.
So that is a layer of shame that like my client population in particular is dealing with. And when that happens, that means that even just accepting that pleasure is something that can be good for them is really, really hard.
God, I can imagine. No pun intended.
I pun all the time.
All the time. All the time. And I guess it would then affect your ability to advocate for your own boundaries and your own pleasure as much as our own desire and our need for a specific type of arousal response or something like that.
Yes. It's so hard, especially if you were a woman or a queer person who was raised in high control religion. Women especially are conditioned to believe that their needs don't matter in this particular community. So sex is for your husband. If you ask for something you want, like that can feel so scary to them because it's just like, this goes against everything I was taught. It goes against everything I was taught about myself. How can I speak up for my own pleasure? How can I set boundaries? I was taught that I'm not even allowed to say no.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. I was thinking during the beginning of the podcast too, I was thinking about how sexual shame has also been passed down through not just religion, but colonialism, medical discourse, and how those threads show up in people's lives today and how it sort of shapes our culture in a certain way. Just knowing this from, the whole body image movement, that it really came from queer Black women. And even before that, it was being fat or being larger was associated with being, a slave. It was associated with being, wild and all of that. So I'm wondering how that figures in that kind of, the colonialism, the medical discourse. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think for the folks I work with, I think it's powerful for them to have the historical piece, to know that the sexual purity ideals before they were in your youth group in your church, there is a long history in American, on American soil, because the like white European colonists who came here had a very binary idea of gender and very specific ideas about sexual morality. And when they came to this continent, they were horrified by the way the indigenous people conducted themselves. They were horrified that they had sex for pleasure, that the gender roles weren't the same. I have actually wrote about this in my upcoming book a little, but they were like, there was a pastor, an early settler pastor in Virginia, writing letters back home about how libidinous the natives were. So like, I like to tell people this set of sexual values, it doesn't have to be yours. This is where it came from, and it was applied as a part of the colonizing of America, a part of that project was changing people's sexual values and enforcing these white Christian ideas of purity. A really good deep dive on this is the podcast Pure White by Dr. Sarah Mosliner.
Oh.
She is a brilliant academic. I enjoy her work. She's done a lot of academic writing and research about purity culture and colonialism and like America.
Right.
Yeah. So
great. We'll put that in the
many
show
ties
notes.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I mean, that could be its own like 5-part podcast,
For
just
sure.
religion and colonialism and how that's just sort of fucked up everything for everybody always. My personal opinion. But on the flip side, can sexual shame ever be protective in origin? Like, for example, helping someone navigate unsafe environments, and if so, how do we distinguish between useful caution and harmful shame?
I really don't think shame can be good or useful. I think that like fear can sometimes be protective, but not shame, because shame just keeps us from talking. It keeps us from sharing. It keeps us from acting. I really never, in my experience, I don't think I can identify a situation in which shame does keep us safe. But I think our gut instincts and our caution, and even sometimes, the fear people experience can keep them safe.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So that would be more like not shame, because shame is just this, like it just freezes us. But sometimes fear, and if you are in touch with that, this feels unsafe to me. There's something about this that I, don't trust, like that can be protective.
Yeah. So it's very different than your instinct of, of harm. It's much more, like you were saying before, much more, there's something wrong with me, as opposed to danger, danger, Will Robinson,
Yeah. I don't think that the deep sense that you are bad is ever useful.
Yeah. I would agree. I would agree.
Yeah.
And that's where, slut shaming comes in. There's a big, I was with a bunch of women the other day, and someone was apologizing for sleeping with a guy on the first date. I mean, she was apologetic. She wasn't sort of apologetic. Like, yeah, I know, I did it. And I said to her, why are you speaking about it that way? That's great. Why? No, well, I know we're not supposed to. Why are you not supposed to? And getting inquisitive about it, because it's really, really a problem.
Yeah.
Don't you think? Yeah.
Yes, for sure. And when I'm talking to people that grew up in religion and purity culture, they don't just get that messaging, but they also just get I'd say mainstream pop culture messaging about sexuality. And a lot of that is still slut shaming, is still victim blaming, is still purity culture in a very broad sense.
Yeah, I would agree. Wow. And in that way, actually, how does it shape our erotic imagination, and not just what we avoid, right? But also in what we secretly desire, even if those desires might be off the beaten track of what's, considered usual and customary sex.
Yeah, gosh. That is yet another thing that we could talk about for hours. I think that I talk to so many people who do not think they have an erotic imagination. They say, I don't know how to fantasize because I was told from such a young age that all sexual thoughts and feelings would lead to sin. And so I started turning them off. So you can imagine, say that you're a 13-year-old boy or girl or anyone, and you start being like, that person's cute. I touch myself at night thinking about them. And if you are like told, shut that off, that is, there are some people that believe sexual quote unquote sin is on the same level as murder. Like, I
Yeah.
wish I was exaggerating. That's a
Wow.
common Mormon thing I've heard from Mormons.
Yeah, that's intense.
Yeah. So a lot of people's erotic imaginations are deeply stunted. And then if they do start to sort of open themselves up to fantasy, there's often great shame about the things that they find erotic, even though you and I would consider them pretty run of the mill in terms of, we know people like power dynamics, people like taboo topics to fantasize about and kinky things. And I spend so much time. I actually just did this morning writing a woman's client notes being like, here's a lot of the research about what the most common types of fantasy are. I want you to know that what you're thinking about it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I would really, my wish for folks is that they can start to feel joy and curiosity about those fantasies rather than be like, I am so weird and bad.
Yes. God, that's so, then that, what you just said right there is one of the reasons why I love sex educators so much, because they are permission givers.
Yeah.
And they just say, there's nothing wrong with you. And go ahead and do this. I'm giving you the permission to go ahead and do this. You go have fun.
Right. Even if it's stuff that stays in your own brain, like, enjoy it. Enjoy it.
Yeah, absolutely. And what might the first steps be that someone can take if they're just starting to notice how much shame shapes their relationship with sex?
Yeah. I'm a big fan of journaling about this because, one of the big antidotes to shame is to share about it. But it's so scary to share about it. You have to share about it to yourself first before you could ever bring it to a therapist or partner or friend. So, sit down and maybe ask yourself, like, where does most of my discomfort from sex stem from? Or what issues or topics make me feel the most afraid or make me feel the deepest sense of shame? And if you can begin to acknowledge that stuff to yourself, then you are taking steps, you are confronting it. And that's a really good starting point.
That's great advice. And it might take more than once, you
Oh,
might
very much.
need to just write 2 sentences the first time because it's just so hard to get it out.
Yeah. It's so scary. And I hope what you'll realize is that nothing bad will happen. You'll acknowledge this to yourself, and then hopefully that will make you feel like, okay, maybe I can, keep thinking about this, keep talking about this. It's nothing horrific is happening to me because I
didn't get
this.
struck down by,
Exactly.
by lightning. And along those same lines, masturbation must be a real sort of hot point for people who have shame. And so getting someone to explore themselves, how can we help people begin to replace that particular type of shame with curiosity about their bodies and what their bodies can give them?
I think I usually start with giving some just general education about masturbation. Like, it has a long history, and there's also been a long history of social movements to, religious-based social movements to stigmatize it. And these are the scientific studies about how it can be helpful, like giving people a lot of broad context before they're even ready to start thinking about how can they engage with and touch their own bodies. That's an important start for the level of shame that the folks that I work with are experiencing. So a lot of times, they're just going to want to hear, like, yeah, a lot of people do this. X amount of, women do it. People start at this age. Like, just that normalizing, that's where a lot of people have to start.
Wow. Yeah, that sort of dovetails into what my next question was about sort of frameworks that you might use to help people move from the intellectual awareness. Like, I know that I'm not going to get struck down. I know all of this. I know I shouldn't be ashamed, to an embodied sort of liberation. Like, I can no longer carry this shame in my body. I mean, I think that was a good start for it.
I will say that I'm always very transparent about the fact that I'm an educator with an education degree, and I do not do therapy. And there are times that I am working with someone, and there's definitely it can be so helpful for them to have a relationship with a therapist at the same time. And so I very often refer people to somatic practitioners.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I will educate the shit out of you, but this person will be doing like body work and breathing exercises and things that I'm just not versed in. I know what my lane is, and I know that there's, this healing from this kind of sexual shame is a multi-pronged approach. So for many people, like, trauma therapy is helpful, especially for those who are experiencing like symptoms of post-traumatic distress related to purity culture.
Yes. Wow. Yeah, it is a multi-pronged approach. Like, when I talk about coaching, I'll say it's therapeutic, but it's not therapy, and it works in concert with your therapist.
Exactly.
And that's what educators do as well. You can work it out with your therapist, but you get the education from the educator.
Yeah. And I know you know this, but so many people that are therapists don't have training in sexuality.
Oh, yeah.
And they're not going to be able to tell people the things you and I tell them with the same, shame-free, positive, pro-sex lens that you and I are operating from.
Absolutely. Half the people that come to me are referred by therapists because they are just like, I know a little bit, but I can't tackle this in the same way. If it brings something up, we'll talk about it. But it really does work in concert together.
For sure.
And it really is a shame that they don't, get much, if at all, any sort of sexual education.
Yeah.
Considering it's such a huge part of life for most people.
Yeah. And I find that there are folks that are like, oh, I'll talk to my therapist about anything, but not about sex.
Right.
So
yeah. Get embarrassed, How do you see sexual shame intersecting with broader systems of oppression? So racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia. What does it mean to address shame as a justice issue?
Yeah. I feel like you're just really touching on the heart of why I do this work. We're not born with shame. We're taught shame, and we are taught shame because it controls us, and systems that are in power, which, it's stemming the big patriarchy, white supremacy at the top. It doesn't view us as whole sexual beings. It wants, just to tie a direct line to the Christian nationalism that has deeply overtaken so much of our current political system. They view women as breeders. They want white women to have babies. They want white women to have babies to create it sounds so fucking dark, but this is what I see. And it's not my original thought. It's, if we control people's sexuality, then they are just easier to control in other aspects of life. Taking reproductive rights away from people, quelling queer and trans sexual expression, all of those things, they don't fit with the sort of like white supremacist project.
What their story is. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. It doesn't fit in there.
And I mean, I just want people to feel comfort and less shame in their sexuality, and ideally pleasure and joy, and I think to like in Adrienne Marie Brown's work about pleasure activism, like pleasure's part of the whole fucking reason we're alive.
That's right.
And I love to bring up her words with the folks that are having such a hard time accepting pleasure as a part of their lives. Like, why else are we here? fuck all those people that are trying to take this from you. It is your body. It is your brain. You know, I don't want for you that the ideas of somebody like James Dobson are going to affect the potential joy you have to experience.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Last week we had a trauma coach, but also researcher, Mary Catherine McDonald on, and she was talking. We specifically talked about joy in sex and how the more joy, even in meh sex,
Yeah.
the more joy you feel rewires your brain. And you can't feel, joy and fear at the same time. And it's which just boosts Adrienne Marie Brown's, thesis anyway, which is, and I'm hoping, I don't know if you see this, but if you see sexual shame lessening in younger generations or maybe new forms of it, emerging, who knows?
It's complicated, Elle. I'm sure you and I both observe this from like clients and just what we see online, but like some aspects, I just made a post this morning that I'm seeing more people use technical language for the menstrual cycle in casual conversation.
Wow.
Like, there are girls memeing about their ovulation, their luteal phase, their follicular phase. And I'm like, we didn't just throw those words around before.
No.
So to me, I'm like, is this the younger generation being like, I'm not going to hide that I have a period. I love that. That to me is an indicator of less shame. We're talking about it so openly. And, I see, I'm a 46-year-old, so I'm talking about perimenopause, and Gen X, we're talking more about sex and perimenopause than our mothers did, right? But with younger folks, I think that it's to be determined right now because they have access to more information about sexuality, but there is still such a purity culture push. I would call it a resurgence of purity culture. There are influencers, the trad wife movement, all those folks are telling the young women out there that you exist to make babies and you exist for your husband's pleasure. And so it is, I don't know what all to make of it yet. I think we're going to have a lot of interesting stuff to observe.
Yeah, it certainly puts you and me on the front lines of trying to get the good information out there.
Yeah, 100%.
Well, thank you so much, Erica. I want to tell people about your book that comes out in February. It's called The Purity Culture Recovery Guide, the Shame-Free Sex Ed You Deserve. And I just want to urge people to go get it because it's something that's going to come in handy at any point in your life,
Mm-hmm. I do think it's a general sex ed book, but it is tailored towards people that got so much shitty, scary information. So if you were raised to fear sex because of religion, this book will walk you through lots of even like values deconstruction exercises and new perspectives on things like abortion and pornography, stuff that were like the big scary topics. The big scary topics.
And you have programs coming up, right?
Yeah. I always, I've started, one of my favorite things that I've started is a divorce support group for people who grew up in purity culture, married in their Christian faith, and are now like, hey, I'm out here trying to date and have sex, and I know nothing about how that's going to happen. And then there's the shame piece of the divorce. So yes, I will be enrolling for that this fall and also doing like a sort of general purity culture dropout group program.
Great. Where can people find you?
Instagram is my hub. My Instagram handle is Erica Smith Educates. It was sex ed one time, but I had to take that out, of course.
Yeah, of course.
And my website is purityculturedropout.com. So essentially, if you Google the words purity culture dropout or Google my name in along with the word purity culture, you'll be able to find me.
Great. Awesome. Thank you for your wisdom. I really appreciate you coming on today.
Thank you so much, Elle. You were such a good interviewer, and I get interviewed a lot by folks that aren't sexuality professionals, but it's definitely noticeable when it is a sexuality professional because you had like all like the perfect questions.
Good. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. That's good to know. My goodness. All right. Well, you take care, and maybe we'll talk again in February.
That would be lovely. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to The Reveal. If this episode resonated with you, I'd love for you to share it with someone who might need it too. And if you'd like to stay connected, head to ellechase.com to join the mailing list for updates, the Substack version of The Reveal, and early access to new episodes. You can also follow The Reveal wherever you get your podcasts. And if you have a moment, leaving a review helps others find the show. Email for the show can be sent to therevealmail@gmail.com. And of course, if you're on the social medias, I'm at the Elle Chase on all platforms. Until next time, stay curious and remember, the most powerful stories are the ones we dare to tell.